Hey there, and welcome to another Factorio Base review. I'm Xterminator, and thank you for joining me for this one. And today we are going to be reviewing Settler's Base, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I apologize if their name is pronounced differently, either Sedeller or Settler. And they sent this base in to me to review. Now, I have two different types of series. I just want to kind of clarify the difference here. I have base tours and then I have base reviews. I've done one base review previously on Lax Mantum's base. And this is these base review videos are where I actually go in and, I point out specific issues I see and give feedback for things that I think could be improved or changed, etc., and be a bit more critical than the base tour. A base tour is usually just to kind of show off the base, whereas these videos are, designed more to actually help the user and viewers, of course, learn new things, maybe improve their factories and bottlenecks and stuff like that. So let's get into it. Now, there are definitely a few things I want to cover here. As one more disclaimer before we actually hop right into this, I do want to mention that when I am critical of things, I don't mean any of this in like a super negative light. I'm not trying to be mean or hurtful or anything like that. I'm just simply, providing my feedback, seeing issues I see, and it's purely to try to help and stuff. I run this by the people who submit these bases and say, hey, is there anything you want me to look at? Are you okay with me, kind of criticizing things and stuff? And, I want to make sure they are. So let's hop into this. There's about 43 hours on this map, and Settler has launched two rockets, it seems like, without satellites, from what I can tell, because if we look at our production menu here on this map, there's no satellites to be found here. However, there are 200 rocket parts produced, which would be two rockets worth. So there's been two rockets launched on this map, so technically beat the game. And it's actually interesting. My very first map where I beat the game was almost very close to the same amount of hours. I want to say 44 hours maybe, so just a few minutes difference. But anyway, this is a bus-based system with some trains running around it. Not a very big base. It is one of their first bases, I believe, and again, just kind of a small base to launch some rockets and such. And let's get started. So there's several things to look at here. And a lot of what I'm going to point out is mostly in regards to like general good practices of stuff and, things that I see that are maybe not good practice or ratios. A lot of it's going to be ratios and stuff like that. So that's just the type of thing I'm going to be pointing out here and just general suggestions. So we have some smelting going on here. It is blue belt and red belt. So it's blue belt, it looks like, for the plate, and then the plate is being sent, or at least some of the plate is being sent to the steel, which is outputting red. Now, there's a few things to note here. In this, again, I don't want to try to tell anyone exactly how to play. This is just purely from my experience, suggestions that maybe would help you improve if you decide to take, this advice. So, first off, red belt is absolutely not needed here. This is, the amount of steel here. These are electric furnaces, yes, but there's only 38 of them, which, that's 19 per side. And to fill a red belt of steel, a full red belt to fill that with steel, even with electric furnaces, is going to require significantly more than this. It's gonna it's gonna require about 240 furnaces total, so about 120 per side to fill a red belt. So red belt is just not needed here, and the reason I bring this up is because red belt's expensive. It's more expensive, obviously, than yellow by a fair margin. You can see yellow belt takes 3 iron, and red belt takes 11 and a half. This is nearly 4 times the price of a yellow belt. So granted, I mean, you do get 2 yellow belt, and then this only takes 1, but still, it's quite a bit more expensive. And then, red undergrounds, if you want to match it with that, are, even more expensive and stuff. So it's just kind of a very expensive thing to do for no real gain here. And this can be kind of a deception, I think, that a lot of newer players fall into. And I have people ask me this all the time on my stream, and this is maybe just my belief. And honestly, I played like this as well for a long time after I started. But my experience and my belief with things is that there's no reason to go to a higher level belt until you actually need like the actual throughput, until a yellow belt is full and you need, you know, like more than a yellow belt can hold and output. Now red belt, it does move faster. It's 30 items a second opposed to, you know, the 15 of yellow belt. So I guess it would technically get items somewhere faster, and that's why I think a lot of people use it, which I suppose is fine, but it's not actually giving you more material. You know, this wouldn't even begin to fill a yellow belt. So yellow belt would be completely sufficient here. And I mean, I guess technically, initially the red belt would get the material there faster, but once everything is actually kind of where it needs to go, you know, the way the belts work is it's just going to be a constant flow. So, you know, I guess really, in my opinion, the only thing you're gaining from red belt is to just get it there initially quicker, which for the cost of red belt, like all over the place, is not really worth it. Same with blue belt here. Now, blue belt is a little more reasonable on the plate. This still, though, is not enough furnaces to be filling this blue belt. We have a total, at least in this particular area, well, there's kind of a combo here. So there's like 58 here, and then it looks like another 8, so like 66 plus 4, so like 70 furnaces. It is actually fairly close. You need 72 electric furnaces to fill a blue belt. So I guess if we combine this, it's fairly close to needing it here. So that's, you know, that's reasonable enough. And then the interesting thing, though, is this is blue belt, and then it's being split, and some of it's going, I think, to the bus, and then some of it's going up through here. Personally, I would create like a whole separate smelting setup to supply your steel. Rather than having, you know, like one smelter set up and just sending like part of it to the bus and part of it to steel. Steel is just so iron hungry. Now everything's backed up, you know, so it looks fine. But research is not going. You know, we're not doing research. We're not launching rockets. So if I queue up a research, I think they do have some yellow science and such. Let's just see if we can find one that is not military. It looks like there's not much left. I suppose we could queue this up, see how far we get with that. Maybe this one as well. So there we go. So that's my kind of spiel on the smelting. One other thing to note is the nuclear power. So this does have several forms of power. There is nuclear power, there is a little bit of solar panel power, and then some steam engine power, which is completely off. I think it's actually lacking fuel. And speaking of lacking fuel, I don't know if this is maybe intentional because it's just not needed right now, but half of these aren't working because they actually have no output for the used up fuel cells. They did put output on these two, but these two are still lacking it. Maybe they just haven't got around to it or decided to just get rid of it for the moment because it isn't needed. Really could just mirror this on this side, like so. But that's just a note. I noticed these were not on because I looked to see the neighbor bonus, and these aren't even receiving it because these aren't on because they're backed up on the empty fuel cells. So definitely, as a general tip, make sure that you're emptying all your fuel cells, whether it be on the belts or active providers. If you're doing a logistics system, I recommend active providers so they don't fill up because obviously when it gets full like this, they just stop working. Are using a system of a bunch of boilers here to then put into storage tanks the steam, and then you know, funneling that kind of into the steam turbines, which is fine. I don't usually build like this, but I think it's a very viable way to do it. Now, in terms of the ratios here, I don't think this is as important simply because they're using this setup of putting the steam into the storage tanks and then, you know, outputting the steam just from one huge vat into these. It's not like a direct, you know, it's not like they're connecting the steam engines to the heat exchangers. Sorry if I'm calling them boilers. Heat exchangers, they look very similar, and I'm just used to saying boiler. So ratio, not as important here. Again, I'm trying not to get too nitpicky with this. Obviously nothing you know, doesn't have to be perfect ratioed everywhere. We have some concrete production here. You know, it's concrete. You know, nothing super special. Kind of just gonna bypass this. A lot of belts everywhere. I mean, if we look at the map, it's fairly clean, the bus itself, but there's a few very important things I want to touch on. We have some more copper smelting up here, kind of a similar type of design to the iron smelting. It looks like one main section of furnaces, and then even more furnaces below it. Now, if we follow these belts, so we have, for some reason, some red belt here. Maybe they just haven't got around to upgrading it. It's actually pretty easy to miss this sometimes. Like, I totally do that, so that's fine. And this comes over, and this, okay, so this does end. I was going to say this is like way too many smelters for one blue belt, but, you know, this does start a new belt, and then come down, and some of it's going to the circuits, which is or the cable, which we'll touch on, and then some's going to the bus, and then this one is actually going upwards, up to here, up to a factory purely for making uranium ammo, to deal with the bugs. Lots of uranium ammo, and there's a few things. It's a lot of uranium ammo. Oh my goodness. I guess this would be a good place to start pointing this out. I've noticed several places in the base where the chests are not capped, and this is something you really have to be careful of. Now, granted, I guess resources are technically infinite in the game because the map, well, almost infinite because the map's almost infinite. You can get, you know, mining productivity, etc., etc. But just in the spirit of, you know, especially on a smaller base, to not waste resources, definitely make sure to cap your box, especially with expensive stuff. I mean, uranium ammo is not cheap. I mean, it's kind of cheap, I suppose. But there's some other things here that are not cheap, that are not capped. So this comes down, and let's move to circuits. Now, you will have heard me, if you've been with my channel at all, you will have heard me say many, many, many times over, even if you're new to the channel, you've probably seen elsewhere, do not belt cable for circuits. Now, it's not like it just plain won't work. It will work, and I suppose it is working here. But in terms of general practice, and this is kind of something I like to follow a lot, it's just general, like, good, quote-unquote, good practice. Yes, this will technically work, at least to a certain degree, but belting cable for circuits is generally considered, I think, a big no-no. And there's a few reasons for this. The first reason being just the general belt throughput. You know, cable produces 2 cable per craft, and it happens every half second. So every single second, you're outputting 4 cable here. And actually, with level 3 machines, it's even faster than that because they have a crafting speed higher than 1. Right? They have a 1.25 crafting speed, so it's actually going to be even faster than that. I want to say 5 per second off the top of my head, but I think it might not be quite that exact. But at least 4 per second. It's going to be more than 4 per second. You know, and that's a lot. So even a blue belt, this is blue belt. A blue belt moves 45 items a second. Okay, that's total. That's not per side. So 45 items a second. Okay, so a whole blue belt can really only probably support about 10 of these at level 3 assemblers. And that's not a lot. Like, if we look at this, I mean, oh my goodness, there is 34 of these machines all trying to be put onto a blue belt. There's not, like, this blue belt is never, ever, ever going to actually be able to supply this whole thing. It's always going to be backed up, and a lot of these just aren't going to be working, which I guess isn't a huge deal, but, you know, if you want to actually make circuits that are equivalent to this much copper cable, you definitely are going to want more blue belt. Or you could just direct insert and just get rid of this whole problem to begin with. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is kind of, well, it's connected to that. It's basically stems off the same issue, is that, you know, green circuits, they require a lot of cable. In fact, they require even more cable per second than, you know, one of these outputs, hence the ratio, which we'll touch on here in a second. The ratio, excuse me, for, you know, just non-beacon, non-module, normal green circuits is 3 cable to 2 circuit machines. Because these require 3 cable every half second. That is 6 cable a second. And there's a few things here. Like, okay, so one of them is the belt. I'm trying to think how to arrange my words here. One of them is the belt. You know, it's just the belt is a throughput limitation. We touched on that. But also, when inserters pick up from a belt, now granted, you can't. The inserters do utilize now their stacks. Like, say now, I don't believe they used to a long time ago, but they do utilize their stack size from a belt, as far as I'm aware. So, you know, if this has a stack size of 2, let's say they had max stack size bonus and it was 3, it will pick up 3 things, like, in its hand at once, but it's going to be kind of funky on a belt. It's going to, even though it can hold 3 things at once and move 3 things at once, this is, again, considering we have max stack size, it has to, like, kind of pick them up one at a time. You know, it's gonna, you know, if we like take this out, I mean, it's grabbing 2 here, which it can do pretty easily. and this is so compact. But when you have it going from machine to machine, it just makes the inserters work better. They can just kind of grab like everything it wants, from what I can tell. And it just makes the whole thing easier. And using belt for copper cable definitely gonna probably cause some issues farther down the line. Now, ironically, the ratio is actually pretty dang close. They've actually almost accomplished the ratio here. So there's 33 of these. I don't know why I had 34 before. I think I was measuring these. So there's, well, let's just say there's 5 here, and then there's 28 here. Yeah, so there's 33 of these, and there's 20 of these. So this is very close. There's a little bit extra cable, but this is actually technically almost exactly the correct ratio. It's just that with the belt, at least how it is now, like, this is not actually going to be correct ratioed. If this whole green circuit belt were being consumed, not all of these would run, because the belt just can't get cable down there fast enough. At the very least, they would need to split this into 2 full blue belts. And I just feel like doing direct insertion would just be better. As a very quick example for those of you who maybe can't visualize it or haven't seen it, a direct insertion setup would look something like this. And then we would just do this, right? Instead of having belt and belting all over the place, and then you would just have copper coming in up here. These would input, iron, and then could output the circuits kind of wherever you want. They could use long-handed and output them on another belt. They could output out the side, however you want to do it. But this is, in my opinion, this would just work a lot better. So there's that. Okay. So I'll leave that alone. Again, we see more belting of cable to circuits. Same issue. Not really going to harp on that anymore. We do have some more steel here. Again, same deal. Definitely no need for blue belt. Like, this is even a worse case than the one up above. This absolutely do not need blue belt for this. And blue belt, man, talk about expensive. Holy moly. Blue belt is 31.5 iron. It's more than twice the price, almost 3 times the price of red belt, plus lube. And then not counting the insane price of the undergrounds and splitters, So using blue belt here, just so many resources into this that don't need to be going into this. So we have some dedicated smelting here. Well, I say dedicated. It's additional smelting for the bus. One other thing I want to touch on with the smelting, I have many times actually in the past built my smelters in this manner, meaning where they are like horizontal to the bus like this, so going down like this kind of along the bus as a production would. And this can work to an extent if you have a ton of room above them to expand. But the issue we see here is that you can't really expand this down at all, because since it's off, like basically off the side of the bus like other production is, you're limited, especially if you have 2 sides of the bus, like is built here, because you're going to hit this stuff. Even if you only had production on this side and just didn't have anything here, it's going to get a little wonky, because obviously as you get farther down, you're either going to have to run plate lines up, or just like or just things above it just aren't going to get the plate output from smelters that are below them. So personally, I very much like building all my smelters above the bus, regardless of which way your bus faces, whether it's a horizontal bus or a vertical bus. In this case, it's vertical, so I would build my smelters vertically, like facing the way the bus lanes go across here, and then just leave room, because then I can just expand left to right the smelters as much as I want, without having like hitting my bus production. Now, if this rail weren't here and stuff, and this had been built a little more in line, and these rails weren't here, you could just expand this up, and that would probably be fine. Again, the rails and stuff are here. You couldn't encounter this problem even if you build it vertically, but just something to mention there. So we have gears, circuits, red and green science, which is good. Green science, technically, ratio-wise, if you want to go off of base production rate. As a quick reminder, base production rate is based on this craft time, not the assembler craft time. Green science takes 1 extra second from red science, so I always like to add 1 more green science machine, because it takes 1 more second. So that will kind of fulfill that ratio, because if all your science packs are being consumed at the same rate, then you are actually going to run out of green science in this case. If everything's being consumed at the same rate, and it needs at least what's being produced, green science will run out because it takes an extra second, and if you're only producing like the same amount, have the same amount of assemblers as these faster sciences, it's going to run out. It's going to be a bottleneck. And then we come down here to military science, and this one, military science does output 2, so this can kind of throw you off. This is actually fairly easy to miss, I think. Military science does output 2, so if we wanted to keep it in line of like 1 a second base rate, which is what I would be basing this on, so this is actually 6 of these, so this is a little much. I would do 5 reds, 6 greens, right? Basically just matching the production speed of this. And then this one, if it only outputted 1, I would be doing 10 assemblers for this. But since it outputs 2, I would do 5 assemblers for this, because it's outputting twice the amount. So we can like cut the amount in half. And then blue science, we have 10 of these. And this one also outputs 2. So this is actually very close. Again, I would be cutting this time in half. So I would build 12 of these. So this is very close. Purple science coming down here. Now this outputs 3. Luckily 3 goes into 21 evenly, so I would build 7 of these, and then likewise I would build 7 of these. So this is quite a bit overproduction of yellow science if it can actually be supplied fully with its inputs. Again, everything's backed up, doesn't really matter, but just, general good practice. The ratios for science are a little bit wonky. If you are, if you had the labs and were to consume all the science and stuff, you would be having some pretty serious bottleneck issues and overproduction issues. Now, here's something else to point out. They are using the slowing my words there, pass-through method here, which is great. Like, this can totally work. This is a very viable thing to do up to a certain point. And we'll notice here where the issue starts to arise. You'll notice these labs are actually not working fully. You'll notice they keep turning on and off. And this is an issue with the pass-through method. The reason this is happening is because since it's passing things through, it's actually like pulling all of the science packs out of here like faster than they can be input, and taking away from this thing. So you can see it's pausing every so often, which, it's still moving okay, but it does slow it down. So passing through like this definitely can cause an issue. In a shorter chain, it can certainly work, or maybe if you make these stack inserters. But just something to note there that, notice that these are stopping every so often. So maybe, stop the chain halfway, and instead of passing like in a circle like this, maybe just have these lines continue and have a second column here that's like pulling science packs for itself. Just something to note there. In general, the pass-through method isn't bad. It just can cause issues, and this is an example of that. So the bus, pretty good. I like that they have 4 lanes here. They're usually dividing into 4 lanes where it's applicable, which is good, good practice, because, back when you're on yellow belts, yellow belt underground reach is 4, and that's why, typically we build 4 lanes and then leave space. And they left space here too. They left space for 2 more lanes of copper, 2 more lanes of iron. I really like that, so really well done there. Coming over, now this is interesting where they have like the intermediate materials produced on one side of the bus and then the science on the other. This is certainly not bad. I think this is actually maybe more common than I think. I don't build like this. I find it a little hard to keep straight. I like to just build my science next to its intermediate production materials. But just, I don't know, I'm just really pointing this out because I just find it interesting, because I don't build that way. So I like seeing different ways people build. I'm not going to touch on the ratios for every single thing here. So there's a couple issues I see here. Again, with ratios. Let's just hypothetically say this were not moduled. The ratio for cable to red circuit is going to be 1 to 6, because this takes 4 copper cable, right, and takes 6 seconds to craft, and this produces 4 cable every second, right? It's like a half-second thing and crafts 2 per craft. So it produces 4 cable every second, and this needs 4 cable every 6 seconds, which means that one of these can support 6 of these. So this is like way overproduction. Well, maybe not. Actually, I did see they're looping this over here. So And then how are these doing? So these are long-handed. Maybe this is actually okay. This could be a mistake on my part. So we have 10 of these, which theoretically could support 60 of these. So yeah, this is like double what you need. Now, granted, if they left room, they could certainly expand this. You are going to, again, if all this was being consumed, you are going to run into throughput issues. Belting cable for red circuits is not nearly as much of a problem as it is for green circuits. I basically always belt cable for red circuits, but I like to put the cable machines kind of intermittently. So I would do like cable and then red circuits. So just as a quick example here, do this, and then I would do another cable machine and then another set of red circuits. And kind of just like have this one only feed these 6, have this one only feed the next 6, so on and so forth. Because you will run, even with Blue Belt, you will run into issues if you just put all these here and then build one gigantic line of these in a row. Another thing to touch on here, and this is a thing I see in other places throughout the base, is speed modulating this. Now, if you need more output, obviously speed modules, totally fine. I mean, logical. But productivity modules would be super, super good in here. I don't really see productivity modules being used anywhere actually in machines in this base. And productivity modules are insanely powerful. Like, I think they're really easy to underestimate because they slow down the production of the machine. But you can offset that. You could do like half speed, half productivity, which could be really good. So like, maybe fill half of these with productivity, or you could... this is a little tight, but if you have more room, you could then put some speed beacons, some beacons with speed modules in them and productivity these. Kind of my rule of thumb is anything that can be productivityed should be productivityed if you're going to put modules in it. So for those of you who don't know, intermediates are the only thing that can actually have productivity modules used on them. Like you can't use productivity modules on inserter production or something like that. So if you're going to put modules in something, if it can use productivity modules, I like to always use productivity modules, or at the very least combine speed and productivity, because you'll get more materials out, and then if you offset it with the speed, it's like a win-win, right? You're getting more materials out for the materials you're putting in, like you're actually outputting extra, so you're getting free resources, and then you can just offset the slowdown with the speed. So you're just getting free stuff, basically. Whereas this is just consuming more. It's not actually... I mean, it's outputting more because it's consuming more, but you could just be getting free output, basically. Same thing applies down here, like the speed modules and the speed modules and the speed modules, understandable. You can't productivity module speed modules anyway, but this... Oh my goodness, this would be an absolute prime candidate for productivity modules, because, blue circuits are very, very green circuit hungry. They require 20 per. That's 2 per second. And if you filled these, if you match this, right, if you do level 2 productivity modules in this, that is 24% productivity. That's 24% extra materials, like extra output you're getting every craft. So basically, roughly, I know it's not exact, but roughly every 4 crafts you're going to get a free blue circuit. And it may not seem that huge, but it adds up when it requires so much stuff. So speed modulating these, again, if this weren't backed up, if everything in the base weren't backed up, there's absolutely no way that this would, like, these green circuits could support this when these are fully speed modules. This would just like eat these like crazy. So that it's also going to create throughput issues. Same deal down here. Again, prime candidate for productivity on these. They require 20 copper, very copper hungry here. Same with rocket fuel. All this can be productivity. And then I'd say the biggest thing, and I actually made a video specifically on this, is putting productivity into your rocket silo. This is, I think, the strongest use of prod modules in the entire game by far. Because even if you don't want to make level 3s, maybe you can't afford level 3s or whatever, even if you make level 2s, which in this case should be able to be done because, level 2 speed modules are being made and it's the same cost, that would be 24%. That would make your rocket cheaper. Like that, this is 24% productivity. Now, I think when I did my video, I did the math wrong, so I maybe was a bit wrong when I mentioned this, but it is, I don't think it's like 24% cheaper. I don't think that's quite how it works, but it's going to be a lot cheaper. 24% productivity. What I can say for sure is that every time you make a rocket part, you know, you're going to have your little productivity bar that is like 24% filled for a free one for every time you do this. So basically for every 4 rocket parts, roughly, I know it's going to be like 4% short at the end, but roughly for every 4 rocket parts you produce, you're going to get a free rocket part. And, you know, these are not cheap. So that is huge. And if you went level 3 productivity modules for a total of 40%, like, that's massive. So definitely, I just want to mention that here. Another no cap box. This is one I was really thinking of when I mentioned it earlier. There's 800 level 3 assemblers in here. Maybe they're preparing for some mass expansion, in which case, totally great here. But that's a lot of resources sitting in here. So definitely make sure to cap your boxes. I know I forget too. I totally forget sometimes. So everyone does it. But just something to mention there. Oil, so they're making sulfuric acid on site, which I kind of like. This is something I don't do very often, but I probably should. I think this is actually quite viable because they have sulfur on their bus, and the sulfur on the bus is actually being trained in. So if we move over here to the oil, we have refineries. Most of them are doing advanced processing. A couple are doing normal processing. And then the sulfur in the plastic is actually being loaded onto a train. Excuse me, that just does a short little loop here and comes up to the station and drops this off and puts it on the bus. So this is actually, I think, a really good use of trains as well, lube as well here, and then some rails, because if you build, you build your oil below the bus. If they were to belt this, they would be belting like against the bus, like all the way up, which would be kind of a pain. You could do it from behind here instead of the train, but I think this is actually a pretty cool use of the train. I'm definitely a fan of that. And then, so this train also does carry the rail, which is made over here. So that's kind of what, this setup over here is for if we locate it. So this is actually just for purple science. Again, making this elsewhere with some almost a dedicated smelting, I think, is really smart. That's definitely good because these are really expensive. I think that's mostly it here. I mean, the ratios for this, not perfect. Definitely need more cracking of light to petroleum for this amount of refineries. Again, I don't really want to harp on ratios too much because that's mostly just, if you don't want to ratio everything, you certainly don't have to. Lots of tanks. I'm not a fan of all these tanks. I would reduce these tanks. I've gone over why many times, but with fluids and tanks, basically, it can be very difficult, even with pumps, to get out all the fluid. Again, all this is backed up, so it's hard to see, but if we were consuming everything, there would probably be anywhere from like 100 to maybe 200 fluid in these tanks that just are always going to be kind of just quote unquote like sitting on the bottom of the tank, and that adds up, man. That's like, oof, I almost died. That is that's several thousand oil that you can't really get out of this system. Maybe if you just went nuts with your pumps, you could, but I usually just like to do maybe like 1 tank per wagon, because they match up, they carry the same amount, and that's usually what I like to limit it to for that reason, and this would apply for all fluids. So there's that. I think only other thing I want to touch on here is the rail, or not necessarily rails, but the stations. I noticed that all these names are just the default names that are being given to these stations when they're placed. And I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to name your stations because everyone's different, and if it works best for you to just have these be named their default, then totally go for it. But personally, I would highly suggest starting to try to name your stations. And if you don't know how, for Settler or anyone else, if you don't know how, if you come up to a station here, you click on it, you go to this little pencil up here, and you click rename, and then you can just rename it whatever you want. You can even go here and add like icons to it and stuff like that, and all that stuff. So you can even go to your stations here if you want, so on and so forth. So I would highly recommend naming your stations to something that you that works for you. I mean, personally, I use really simple names. I'm just like iron outpost 1, iron outpost 2, iron drop off 1, iron drop off 2, oil pickup, oil drop off, etc., etc. But that just really helps me keep things straight in my base. Personally, I would be going nuts. Like I would I would be so lost. Even if I built this base, I would be lost. If I click on this train, I'm like, okay, well, it's going to, okay, where's this stop? Like, I don't know what this is. Obviously I know this is, and one of these is an oil stop. I don't know which one until I zoom out. So I just think this would make things a little harder for you to keep track of. I mean, if it works for you, I'm not going to tell you how to name your station specifically, but I feel like it would make things a lot easier for you if you name your stations, at least related to whatever they are, picking up or dropping off, and then what it is they're doing. So that's just kind of my last note there to close out. I think naming your stations would probably help you a lot. The rail system itself is interesting. It's a lot of dedicated systems, which I'm actually not against. I think this can work quite well. There is some crossing here, which is seemingly missing. Well, no, it's actually, sorry, it's not missing. Well, it is missing signal, but I keep forgetting it's a loop. So I was going to say it's missing signals going the other way, but it's a loop, so it's not. But there is actually a signal missing right here. They have it here, and this should actually be a chain signal. So this should actually be a chain signal, so that the train stops here. Because as it is, the train could come through and end up stopping like through the intersection, or potentially having a crash, actually, because there's no signal right here. So if a train happens to be coming through here and the train's already past this signal, like before this, like if it, it's kind of a perfect storm, but you could end up with a crash right here if you don't signal this. So just let me note there, they are like a bunch of dedicated rail loop things, which I'm not opposed to. I think dedicated rail systems are like very viable, totally work. I do it a fair bit. Especially early game, I almost exclusively do that. So nothing really to complain about there except for the signaling in the stations. But there we go. I think that's gonna do it. I hope this was helpful. Again, I don't mean any of this to be hurtful or anything like that. Just purely to try to help improve, maybe give some insight, some thought for you, Settler, as well as anyone watching. And I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Is there anything I got horribly wrong? I feel like I maybe got something wrong with the inserters. They've changed inserters several times. Overall, and everything blends together, man. I've been playing this game for so long. So, like, in terms of how the inserters pick stuff up with their stack size from belt or assemblers, I know it used to be a lot better for inserters to move stuff from assembler to assembler rather than from a belt. That may not be the case anymore. And then also the productivity modules, I know that the math, like, it's not just like 20%, 24%, or 40% cheaper. I know it doesn't quite work like that. But yeah, let me know when I got anything horribly wrong. Any other suggestions you guys have for the base, definitely leave below. Try to just be constructive, be kind. And yeah, I hope this was helpful. Would love to hear, Settler, if you want to have thoughts or have questions, leave them down below, or anything else, contact me on Discord for sure. And we'll be in touch. If anyone else has bases they would like me to review or tour, definitely submit them. Discord is the best option. The link, I think, is in basically all my video descriptions. And yeah, if you just message me directly on Discord, that's the best method. And whether it be a base tour or a base review, just message me and we'll get things sorted. So thank you very much for submitting the Settler. I really appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did and found it helpful, a like is much appreciated. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe to keep up with all the content. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.